Good morning, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed your breakfast, the coffee and soda, and juice in the back if you want to get some more to drink. We are gonna go ahead and get started with our Hill Day training for tomorrow. Um, Pat, Rachel Patterson and Sarah Meek work with AAPD and help them to plan and organize the field day. They are the ones who graciously scheduled all of your film meetings. They both have an extensive background on Capitol Hill, working both as the disability policy director on the White House Domestic Policy Council for President Biden, and also as a government affairs professional in the private sector. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Rachel and Sarah.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I'm so glad to be here with all of you. My name is Rachel Patterson. Just to give you a little overview of what we're going to do. First, I'm going to cover going to the Hill, what it's like, tips and tricks. Then Sarah is going to cover specifically the bills that we are working on, what they do, why we support them, and what we're going to say about them tomorrow. Then we'll finish with and ask if anybody has general questions about the content, about going to the Hill. And then finally, if you have questions about your schedule, Sarah and I will be here after the presentation and you'll have time and we can talk about it. That's the plan. Oh, thank you. I might sit down during this presentation, just FYI. So if I get lower, that's why. Okay, okay. Oh, again, this is our preparation, our agenda. Like I just said, Hill Day prep, legislative priorities, and then question and answer. Okay, so we're going to talk about the role of the government and the role of the advocate. All of you, you have a right to petition your government. That means it is your right under the Constitution to go and talk to the government about what's going on in your life and what they can do to make it better, what problems you're facing, and how different policies can improve your life as an American. So what we've got here is it talks about the roles, the role of government. Congress and the White House create laws and regulations. Regulations like detail the implementation of laws to govern the citizens. So they create the laws. And then the advocates influence the government by doing advocacy. So they show support, ask for change, tell stories, share ideas. This is exactly what we're going to be doing tomorrow. A fly-in, which is what we're doing right now, is when a bunch of people come in and all share their stories to support specific changes that we think will really improve the lives of disabled Americans. Okay, so when you're connecting with a member of Congress, members of Congress really value staying in touch with their constituents. A constituent is a person who lives in their state or district and decides whether or not to vote for them. The number one goal of every member of Congress is to get reelected, meaning what they really care about is whether or not you're going to vote for them. So if you are here in DC saying, here's what I want you to do, that really matters. And that's why we put so much energy into bringing people to DC to tell members directly what they can do. So they want to know what's happening in your life, what's happening in their district. They want firsthand knowledge of policy impacts on constituents or personal situations that are the most compelling. Individual communication is always going to be the most highly valued. That's what you guys are going to be doing tomorrow, talking again about your lives and stories. So this is a chart showing the organization of a congressional office. So at the top, you've got the member of Congress and what's called their chief of staff. They oversee the staff. Then it's broken into several different sections: policy staff, communications, office, and district. Okay. The policy staff are who we are going to be meeting with the most tomorrow. Your legislative director, and then under that is a legislative assistant or a legislative aide. The legislative director oversees everything that the member votes on. They provide overall recommendations, and they oversee a team of legislative aides that focus on certain issues. So they're like, I cover healthcare, this one covers the environment. But depending on the size of the office, somebody might cover healthcare, but also the environment, and also animal welfare, and also trade, and many, many other policy areas. You are going to probably know more about these policy areas than some of the folks you're meeting with. It's your job to explain it to them because they have to cover so many issues. Under that, you have a legislative correspondent. They handle constituent mail and other interactions for the member of Congress. They help them answer the mail, but now it's like emails and that kind of thing. In communications, you've got communications directors and press secretaries. Under the office, you've got schedulers and what are called staff assistants that kind of run around and do everything. And that's all the folks that are in DC. There's also staff back home in the state or district. And they interact directly with folks in the district. They help solve problems. If any of you have ever had a problem with, say, Social Security or getting a passport and reached out to your member of Congress, that's who is handling that work. All of these folks have very busy schedules that change all the time because a vote might get called, a committee hearing might get rescheduled, might go late, might go over. So they're constantly changing. That's why they have a full-time scheduler just to manage this process every day. Okay, so the different staff that you might meet with. A congressional member, they work about 70 hours a week in DC, are often overscheduled and double booked. That's why they have that scheduler managing it. The chief of staff is going to have your high level knowledge of all priorities that are important to them and are a really trusted advisor. The legislative director probably works on some key areas the member is focused on. And I'm going to give you an example of this. I'm from a town called Everett, Washington. If you know anything about Everett, you know it's the headquarters of Boeing. Our member of Congress is Rick Larson. About half the people in that district are employed by Boeing. And so Rick Larson spends a lot of his time and energy, and his chief of staff and legislative director are going to be really focused on aviation issues because of the district that he represents. He wants to deliver for his voters and make sure that they, keep those jobs and that those jobs pay well and that, that continues. So that's an example of how a legislative director will oversee everything, but also have a specialty based on the member. Okay. Under that is the legislative assistant. Like we said, they are get into more specialty areas and cover everything else. And then your legislative correspondent or staff assistant, sort of the most entry level. They answer the mail. They help run the office. They might, when you walk into the office, they'll be sitting right there at the desk, almost like doing reception. Okay, so when you're in the meeting, here's how it starts. You know how we talked about how they have all these meetings every day? So we reached out to them and said, here's who you're meeting with, here's what they're from, here's what we're going to talk about. But you're going to want to introduce yourself because they've had a lot of meetings that day. They might not totally remember. So introduce yourself, introduce AAPD, and why you're there to talk to them. If you know the member has a connection to the issue, it's okay if you don't, but if you know that, from your district, that's a great thing to bring up right at the beginning. Either I know you're on this committee, or I know in our district, this is something people are facing. Then we provide the issue, the legislative solution, why it's personal to you, and any other information that you have. And then make the request. We want you to co-sponsor this legislation. To co-sponsor means they sign on and say, yes, I support it. And having an official list of co-sponsors helps legislation move forward, because before they even bring it to the vote, they know they've got this many people on board. And then if you know any, reference any like upcoming outreach that might occur between you, the office, AAPD in the office. If you don't know, very okay. Also, I should add, if they ask a question and you don't know, that is also fine. You can say, I don't know, but I'll follow up, and you can get in touch with us or with AAPD staff, and we can make sure to follow up with that office. Okay, here are some tips for successful meetings. Be on time, but not more than like 5 minutes early. Offices, they often have like a little couch or seating area, but it can fill up. So you can, oftentimes people sort of linger in the hallways. Also, if you're going to be late, you can give them a call. You can always find their office's number on their like official website. Like if you Google their name, and you can say, hey, we're going to be late, just to let you know. Be flexible. Like I said, schedules are constantly changing. So you can be prepared to meet with a member or their staff. They might bring in somebody else. The member themselves might come in partway through the meeting. So like I said, things are constantly changing, and we're going to be best off if we're the ones saying, that's fine, we'll work with you. If we're showing good faith, that's going to make them more interested in helping us. Keep the meeting focused and persuasive, and stick to the things that we are talking about. That's what we said we want. We told them what we want to talk about, and especially if the member of Congress is there. The staff members, like in any job, they want to look good to their boss, and their boss is the member of Congress. So if we've said, here are the bills we're talking about, they've prepped their member. And if we start bringing up things that they haven't prepped the member on, then that makes them feel anxious because they haven't done the right work to prepare to help make them look good to their boss. And again, we're building relationships. We have the stuff we're asking for, we think is like doable. And part of getting it done is building that goodwill and that relationship. We're not going to bring up elections or campaigns. Based on the type of staffer they are, they might not even be legally allowed to talk about elections, which might be kind of surprising, but there's pretty strict rules on who works on elections versus who works on day-to-day policy making. So we're just here to talk about policy, not politics, not parties, not elections. These are issues that we want solved in our lives. And then you're going to have one pagers. That's a one pager is a 1-page sheet of information in your folders to leave behind in the offices. Okay, so up on the screen right now is a map of the House office buildings showing where they are in relation to each other. And I'm actually going to go to the second one, which shows the underground tunnels between the buildings. The reason I am bringing this up is 2 reasons. One, depending on the weather, you might not want to go out again in the elements between the different buildings. And also, if you're in one building and go down to the basement and take the underground tunnel to the next building, you don't have to go through security again, which is great. Security can have a lot of lines. You might have to, go through a special screening with a mobility device. It's much easier if you can move in between the offices or in between the buildings through the underground tunnels. Your Team leads are going to be really, really helpful with this process. But if you find yourself not sure where to go, feel free to ask any of the office staff. The interns are here for the fall. They can help you get around. And also, like, people who've worked on the Hill love to like show their knowledge. And so they'll be like, oh, yes, I would love to take you, because they can show you that they know how to get around. Okay. We've got the same thing on the Senate side. There's really just one set of underground tunnels between this Russell and Dirksen buildings. Russell, or the Dirksen building, and the Hart building are actually like attached to each other. So it's a little different. But again, you can ask, you're going to have your team leads and also office staff. You can ask them and they will be really happy to direct you. Okay. Frequently asked questions. Should I be upset I didn't get to meet with the actual member? Not at all. The staffer's job is to collect information, talk about who they've met with, and present it to the member of Congress. Also, again, these schedules change all the time. Like I said, sometimes there's a vote, a committee hearing, so things are going to come up. What if I'm feeling nervous and I can't get my points out? Being nervous is totally understandable, especially if you've never done this before. But offices want to hear from you, and they are going to try. I've done a lot of these meetings, and 99% of the time, treat you with respect, want to hear what you have to say, and say, if you say, oh, I just need to get my thoughts together, that's okay. That's fine. You know, we can take time. They're used to meeting with all kinds of different kinds of people. I think sometimes on Capitol Hill, it can feel like there's a secret language, and to a certain extent that's true, but also they know you're not a lobbyist. They're going to have when they meet with me, they're going to want me to like get to the point. When they're meeting with constituents, they know that you're here to tell them about what is happening in their district, in their state, and how they can make it better. Okay. If the meeting gets contentious, I think this is really rare. I don't think I've ever seen this happen, but we want to be the ones that stay calm. We want to be the ones that go back to policy, go back to the issues. Again, not about politics, but about the issues that we are facing and how these bills can improve them. And then, will anything come from this? Yes, Hill days are very, very important. Last night, I was at an event with Brian Fitzpatrick, who's a representative from Pennsylvania and co-chairs the Bipartisan Disability Caucus. And he talked specifically about the importance of these types of events, of bringing people into DC and hearing what they have to say. And that's from a member directly who cares about and tries to advance disability issues. Unfortunately, things take a long time. It's slow, but these types of issues, these types of meetings help us move forward. Okay, now I'm going to turn it to Sarah, who's going to talk about the bills that we are bringing to the Hill.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everybody. My name's Sarah Meek, and I'm really excited to be here because I have been scheduling all your meetings. So I'm sorry if that has not gone well for you. I'm pleased if it has, but so I've looked at all of your names. I have like whole backstories and lives in my head for all of you. So I'm excited to actually meet you in person. And so I want to just touch on what Rachel said. So we, with the AAPD staff, with Russian and Michael, have really talked through some issues that we think we can make like a tangible difference this week, that we think we can get more co-sponsors. So we know there are a ton of issues that folks are concerned with, obviously, or multifaceted people. All of us are, and there's been some things that have gone down so far. But let's at least, I just would encourage you to try and stick to these bills, because these are all bills that we think could concretely move in the next few years, I mean, you do measure federal policy in years, but getting more co-sponsors will really be a tangible way to show your power and what you can do. And this is the disability power on the Hill. And I think it's important to remember that your power is your vote. That's why you're meeting mostly with your members that you actually can vote for. I know some of you have PCAs that will attend with you. Often they probably live in the district or state that you're going to see as well. So don't forget that they vote too, and that can be an extra source of power, right? That's just one more voter, even if they're not there to necessarily talk or have the points. I just want to make sure everybody, this is where you're in charge in the situation, that they work for you. So the first bill is the SSI savings penalty elimination. And this is a bill that got really close last time. Basically, what it would do is it increases the asset limits for SSI qualifications from what they are currently at $2,000 a year. It would go to $10,000, and for married couples, it's currently $3,000 and would go to $20,000. And when it did that, it would also index that to inflation. So we wouldn't have to keep going back and asking for more and more. And this is an incredibly bipartisan bill. So as you can see, and I will say, you will all get this presentation, right? Or may already have it. If you don't want to like take a bunch of notes right now, like you'll have this to refer back to. So in the Senate, Bill Cassidy and Senator Cortez Masto are leading, and in the House, the aforementioned Brian Fitzpatrick that Rachel talked about, as well as Representative Danny Davis, are both the leaders. I will say tonight at the reception, we have tentative plans from both Fitzpatrick and Harris. Oh, I don't know. Both Fitzpatrick and Harris to come to say hi and thank you all for coming and the support. And here you can see the committees. So just a few definitions. I feel like you guys could probably explain these much better to me than I can to you, but asset limits are basically how much you can have in the bank, and the marriage penalty is how you can even have less in the bank if you get married, which, seems interesting. And I think most of you know, but on the Hill, they're not going to know this, that often the most value in qualifying for SSI is not necessarily the money that you get. It's the pathway to Medicaid, to home and community-based services that allow you, that allow people to work and things like that and make more money. So I would really stress that point because I don't think a lot of members know that. So here you can see the impacts. You can save, if we did this, you can save more without fear of losing your Medicaid. Basically, people can get married who want to get married. And also employers don't have to worry about tracking all the specific hours that their disabled employees on SSI have, and if they're going to go off the benefits cliff, and that people can just hire people who they want to hire and not have to keep track of that so much. So the next bill is transformation to competitive integrated employment, and this again was introduced last Congress, and is something that we think could get some traction in this Congress. So it phases out the 14C certificates over 5 years. But what's different in this legislation is it provides that sort of pot of money for states and 14C providers to change their business model. I worked for Anchor for many years, which is the trade association of ID providers, as well as Lutheran Services in America. And I think, that was always something that was a big issue, is like the incentives are misaligned for people to be able to work in the community. And so this really tries to help address fixing a civil rights issue and aligning the incentives so that employers and folks can do that. Did you have a question? Oh, yes. Just you wait. So here you can see who the sponsors are. It's really bipartisan, both Sessions and Scott. We also have tentative, commitments for the reception tonight. So 14C certificates, those here, we're on the same plane here. Those are what's given out by the Department of Labor to allow a business to pay people with disabilities sub-minimum wage. So 14C and sub-minimum wage are technically different, but people use them interchangeably. And Rachel can give you a deep dive on all that from when she worked at the White House. She's the one who worked at the White House, not me. So, but she,
feel free to raise your hand if you have a question.
Thanks, Michael. So that's what 14C is. And then competitive integrated employment. I mean, you guys know what that is, right? It's just working jobs. And so this is something that I do want to say, sheltered workshops. Sheltered workshops are a congregate setting, basically, where a bunch of people with disabilities are paid some minimum wage to work together. This bill only addresses the pay part. It doesn't address the congregate part, right? So you could technically still have a sheltered workshop as long as you're paying everybody minimum wage. But the economics of that are not very feasible. I mean, part of what that pot of money would do would help transition some of those to day programs if people still want to be together in some sort of congregate setting, or transition those people out into competitive integrated jobs. But I do just want to flag that, because some of you are probably from states where sheltered workshops are real big, and particularly some Republican members in those states, a lot of it's Midwestern states, have visited a sheltered workshop and say, everybody's so happy and they loved it. And so sometimes I think really stressing that this is about the civil rights of the payment for people with disabilities is very important. And so I think it's also important to remember that there's not actually that many people still being paid some minimum wage. So this is like how we're trending already. And in fact, from 2018 to 2023, there was a 63% drop in new 14C certificates. And so 17 states have already eliminated using 14C certificates in their state. So some of you, like New Yorkers and California, are probably, don't have a lot. And also in the Biden administration, they made it so that federal workers cannot use sub-minimum wage either, federal contractors. And that has not rolled back in the Trump administration. A lot of stuff has rolled back, but this has not. Okay, and so the last one, IDEA Full Funding Act. So this would basically mandate that Congress appropriates, which means gives the money that they are required to in law to fulfill their promise in the original IDEA. So Congress originally was going to fund 40% of IDEA services to schools in the original legislation. So this is also very bipartisan in the House, hugely bipartisan. In the Senate, it is only Democratic. And you all probably know as much as I do about what the current environment in schools are. And that often where if you're a child with a disability, the school district you live in is really determinative of what your services look like and how receptive they are. And so just here's some key facts that were already in the law. IDE guarantees students the right to an accessible, inclusive education. So that is outside of whatever they do to the Department of Education. If they get rid of it, keep it, change it, merge it. That IDEA created that civil right for students. And so you cannot take away that civil right, even if you take away a department. And so currently, only 15% of public school students receive education services through IDEA. And the government in the original legislation is required to pay 40% of that, but currently funding is below 13% per student receiving special education services through IDEA. So it's never been fully funded. I think with that, Rachel and I are happy to answer questions. As we said, we'll be here to answer very specific questions about your visits and things like that. I have confirmed with all of the offices. So if you see changes, it's in your schedule, it's because of committees and things like that. But I have confirmed and I have given offices a heads up about any accessibility needs that you registered with. So they should know and be prepared. But as Rachel said, just remember we may need to be flexible, but I have tried to prepare all the offices.
So I have a question and then a comment. The question on the IDEA funding, whether the Department of Education is there or not, states are concerned about how they're going to be able to foot the bill if the federal government is not going to fund special education, because I can see that happening under Trump. Trump does not care about children with disabilities, adult with disabilities, period. He would rather eliminate it and not provide anything. So states are concerned how they're going to pick up the tabs, because school district cannot afford to cover that cost without any funding from either the state or the federal government. That's a reality. Special education system, I'm one of them. I'm one of the graduate students. It's politics. So, and then the second thing is I received an email yesterday asking for support, particular legislation. It's happening right now with the DOGE and Social Security Administration of retirees not getting their benefits because of screw up with the Social Security system. It's going to crash. The system's going to crash when they change over to the DOGE system, and this includes people with disability getting SSDI and SSI for those who are not eligible for retirement because they didn't work. So the system's going to crash. A particular bill is basically to help prevent them from being homeless because of that issue. And that's a critical bill that we all need to contact our federal elected officials today because they need to be aware of it. I can see landlords saying, here's your eviction. Once they get an eviction notice, they're screwed getting a rental place. It's already on record. So I can email whoever I need to regarding that piece of legislation I got yesterday.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to start with your second point. I'm not familiar with the bill, but yeah, if you could tell us more, that would be great. On the first point on education, that's one of the reasons we're here pushing this bill on the Hill to try and get more supporters. It's great that we already have a Republican leading it. And again, we're here to talk about policy, not politics, but this is a place where the party of people leading it does help us. Having a Republican lead this bill and stand behind IDEA full funding is going to help us if we get into that kind of fight with the executive branch under President Trump. So I know I hear same states are very worried. Schools are very, very worried. That's one of the reasons we're pushing for this funding bill to try and get more support in Congress to say, no, you have to keep funding IDEA and fund it more.
Hi, I'm from a Midwestern state. I was wondering if we could get fact sheets about 14C and sheltered workshops specific to our state before our meeting.
Do you want to come up great. We'll one-on-one, hear what state you're from, and then go from there.
Good morning. Thank you for this wonderful breakdown. My question is, let's say that these bills get supported. I'm so happy to see that Republicans are supporting them and they do go into effect. Then how, I come from a state where disability justice is not a priority. How will this then work at the level of the state? And also I need certificates for my state as well.
Sure. I can start and then maybe I'll hand over to Sarah. So when it comes to SSI, that's a fully federal issue in terms of the asset limits, the finances. So what state you live in isn't going to matter as much. On IDEA, if we do get the federal government to fully fund, those funds still do go to your states. And they do have control over how much they fund, how they choose to allocate. Now, access to education is a civil right. The states can't undo that. But I think, as you all know, where you live has a really big impact on how that actually looks on the ground. Do you want to do 14C?
And then with transformation, I think here's where that pot of money for states is something you can leverage if that gets enacted, because states want money, right? And so I'm not going to lie that there may, in something like that, that's sort of more of a state implemented thing, that there's going to have to be, there'll probably be, I don't know what state you're from, but like I'm from Texas and it's horrible for people with disabilities, right? I know there are several Texans here. But so there will definitely have to be lawsuits and things like that for that, but that pot of money, the states are going to want to engage to get that money. And so that is sort of the carrot and the stick approach. And, if we pass these, AAPD will be here to help work with you. And, hopefully they will have still hired us and we will be here to help you guys too. So.
Hi, my name is Tina. I'm from Portland, Oregon. And I did this last year, and I was just wondering, on the app that we used last year, it showed us if our rep had signed on to these, whatever bill we were advocating for. And I don't know if you have a link you can send us to let us know, or we should just Google it to know if they were already signers on these bills. It would be nice to know that. So I noticed sometimes they didn't even know they were signers, some of the people that we met with. And if you could talk a little bit about the appropriations for the federal programs, because our senator is on the appropriations committee.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll let Rachel talk about approps for a minute, but I will say we do have that information about what committees your member is on. So you'll know if they're on a committee of jurisdiction around this. And also if they're co-signers. I don't know how Rasha and Michael want to communicate that to you, but we will make sure, even if it's just I email you later today, we will get that information to you so you know it. And I do also want to say, particularly with the SSI bill, and I should have said this earlier, I apologize. They are trying to add co-sponsors in what they call a Noah's Ark fashion. So that means one Democrat and one Republican at a time. And there's currently a wait list of 25 Democrats waiting for their Republican buddy. So even if your member is not on it and they're a Democrat, they may be on the wait list. But so, I can't strongly enough, if you're meeting with a Republican in the House or the Senate, to really push them to get on that bill, because you're sort of doubling your power. If you can get one Republican, you're really getting two co-sponsors. So thank you for bringing that up in here.
And yes, appropriations. Thank you for that reminder. There is a fact sheet in your packet for what's called appropriations. That is a big word for how we spend money. The Congress goes through line by line the federal budget every year. I think if you watch the news, you would think the president is the one who does this, but that's not true. Congress is the one who's, yes, that's under dispute right now. But in the Constitution, Congress is the one that goes line by line and says, this program gets this much, this program gets this much. So in your packet, you'll see information about appropriations generally, as well as some lines that we have called out that AAPD has listed that we think are important to people with disabilities and how much we want them funded at. What level do we want? If you have interactions with any of the folks that are funded under those, we reached out to those organizations or looked on their websites and said, how much money are you asking for? And so the numbers we're asking for should match up for, say, the protection and advocacy agencies or the Centers for Independent Living. So that's where we got those numbers. And that's why they're all just kind of like in a list, because that's how members of Congress are used to seeing them. So the question was, were the protection and advocacy agencies just funded at current levels? So where we are in the process is that the Senate and House committees have both issued what's called their report, which gives us that line by line funding. So, but neither of them have passed the House or Senate or been signed by the president. After a lot of advocacy, both the House and Senate committees have given that level of funding. The House number we actually just got yesterday. So it's not reflected in your packet because it came out yesterday afternoon. But yes, you are correct that is what we're looking at right now. But again, it hasn't passed yet. We need this to actually pass Congress to continue this funding.
Hi there. My name is Melanie Waldman. I'm from New Jersey. My question is within our small groups, if there is a senator or a House rep that we know has voted on a topic that we personally have, you're saying to share stories, somebody who shares a topic, is there a recommendation for us to reach out to you, or should we, if in our small groups, see that at least one person is attending, are we able to go with them, or should we notify you if we want to do that? Thank you.
So do you mean go to a meeting for someone that isn't your representative? Yes, great question. I would actually ask first. So I will speak slower. I would ask first. I apologize. I can repeat anything and answer any question. I would ask the person who is the constituent first and see what they think about it. And as long as it's one or two additional people, I don't think that's a problem. If it gets any bigger than that, the office will not have prepared. They might not have booked the right conference room, that kind of thing. But I would ask the constituent.
Okay, so we all know that we are not getting enough income on SSI. How would you recommend, because I know like the SSI savings bill, that's amazing that we're working on that. But I think more importantly is getting what we're getting, right? Especially for those who are actively looking for work and can't get a job. How would you recommend wording some strong encouragement to work on the amount people are given? Because what we're given is not even minimum wage per month, and it's certainly not livable. Most rent in the country is far, far, far above what we're getting on SSI, SSDI.
Thank you. And I will speak slower too. I apologize. It's hard. Also, if you're having conversations, sort of side conversations, if you don't mind taking it to the back or just stepping outside so that people can hear everything. And please just call out if Rachel or I get too fast. We will not be embarrassed. So you made a really, really great point. I think, first of all, lobbying, you got to read the room, right? which is often a hard skill and can be, and it, you know, there's, so I think first I would see where you feel like the meeting is going. But I think a lot of members of Congress and their staff agree that SSI is not enough money. And so I think I would start with talking about the SSI bill as like, this is the floor, this is the basic, and it's not even subsistence. And really use that to strengthen what you're talking about indexing to inflation and things like that. And I would really talk about it as like the bottom building block. Like we need to fortify this part of it because this is not even enough. And then we can work on helping people with disabilities build wealth through employment and things like that. I think your point about employment, particularly in Republican offices, is a really good one. Rachel and I have another client that's focused on disability employment who had a Hill Day last week. And it was a lot of businesses too. And they were talking about how with SSI, they have to track the hours of several of their workers to make sure that those people don't go over, or then they can't, you know, they lose their Medicaid, things like that. So I think really, especially in Republican offices, talking about doing this and then other things to ease the burden on employers as well is something that will come out really, is really appreciated. I'm trying to think if there's anything. And I'm happy, as Rachel said, we will be here for a bit and we'll be at the thing tonight. And so we're happy to talk through any individual visits you have. If you want to, a lot of these people we have met with before and know, so happy to sort of workshop anything with you.
I have a question about the appropriations chart. I'm John Etherton. I saw the numbers that you have in the chart, and I just wanted to get a little clarification of what those numbers associate with. The House marked up, or the Senate rather marked up in July. The House is actually marking up right now as we speak. They're marking up the bill. Their bill, companion bill. Are the numbers in the chart from the Senate mark? Are we expecting the House mark to be pretty much the same? I just want to make sure when I explain what those numbers are, I can relate them to the process.
Great question. The numbers in the chart are what the advocacy groups are asking for. So they aren't from the president's budget. They aren't from the Senate. They aren't from the House. This is what we as the community want them funding at. So we know that right now they're in the middle of the process. But because we had to put this together earlier, and we want to support what other advocacy organizations are asking for and say, okay, we know you're in the middle of the process, and this might not reflect what's in the House or the Senate, but we think this is how much is needed. And that can signal to the office that even if what they have, how am I trying to say this? That we might want more than what they're putting in those bills. And we want them to have that information. That's how I would put it.
Hi, I'm Shannon Shaughnessy, disappointed Democrat from Brooklyn, New York. Yay, New York. Brooklyn's in the house. Just to reiterate, to go back to the beginning, you said we should only stick to the bills that we're taking and not veer off course to stay on script. And I've heard, like from watching AOC, that there's this formality that exists at least in Democratic offices. But there is so much has changed from when we were here last year to this year. And I don't agree with the fact that we should stay off script. You know what I mean? Because we're facing devastating times. My personal story is I'm first generation to go to college from a working class family in Pittsburgh. I worked 2 jobs most of my adult life to pay off my student loans. I had a severe stroke 10 years ago out of the blue. I was a massage therapist and healthy. I lost everything. I lost my job. I lost my marriage. And thank goodness for amazing friends and community. But I think these more extreme I think our stories matter. I think storytelling and humanizing ourselves and humanizing the senators, whether they are Democrats, independents, or Republicans, is really, really important. My other question is, I heard James Carville speaking online, and he was talking about, like, why can't we just ask our representatives to repeal the big, beautiful bill? I mean, why don't we put that on the table? Has anybody that you consult with, have any people been putting that on the table? Can it be repealed at this point, or is the climate too hostile from the powers that be?
So thank you for that. I think, I hear you, and that makes a lot of sense. And just as a person in my own life, I'm very angry, about everything that's going on. I think for those of you that live here or where there's a lot of federal workers, a lot of this hit very early and very close to the people we know. So I really understand what you're saying. I think, first of all, I will say about deviating from the bills, you guys are the advocates, you're the experts, you're the voters. So we can't tell you what to do. That's just, I guess, our professional lobbying recommendation. I think in my experience, and Rachel and I have both been doing this for like 15 to 20 years each, is that if you ask a member of Congress for something, they will try and give you the easiest. And so that's why we have, working with Michael and Rasha, have tried to identify things that require some effort on the member of Congress, and not to, not to give you something easy to sort of pawn you off and say that they did what you asked for. However, I think if you are meeting with Democrats talking about HR 1, all the Medicaid cuts, they're going to want to doom spiral too. So I think that could be fine. I think your point about stories is just incredibly correct. That and I think Rachel went through it in the first part anyway. And that's part of what will make these bills more impactful, is if you can connect SSI, IDEA. I have a son who's on an IEP, and I had been advocating for stuff like this for a long time before I ever had personal experience with it. And it's much different when you're in an IEP meeting. So I guess that's what I would say is, you make the call and the decision, but particularly with Republicans, sticking to these 3 bills and not sort of letting them off with something is really helpful.
And I'll just add, we picked things where we thought we could really make progress, and we could get more folks supporting these bills and maybe get them over the finish line. So in this environment, that is going to be things that are bipartisan because of who currently holds power. But these are things that we do think we could get moving and could really be big improvements. It's harder right now, but that's why we picked them, and that's why we suggest this is what to talk about, because we do think we can move them forward.
Hi, my name is Veronica Ayala, and I'm actually from Texas, and I appreciate your sympathies for my state. Anyway, here's the thing. We actually talk about this all the time in the Texas Legislative House and Senate, because the environment for us is very contentious all the time, right? So the best way, I'm always dealing with Republicans. So the best way to do that, we found, is to try to connect with them on a personal level. Yes, give the 5 minutes, give them your talking points, but you need to connect with them at a personal level in order for them to remember you. So in a way, sometimes those stories do matter. Go New York. My husband's from New York, so there you go. Anyway, but the other thing too is I actually do have a question, because in our state with the IDEA, one of the things that's going to hinder that for us is they've just passed the vouchers. So that's gonna make that pool of money for education funding much less for people with disabilities, right? So we're kind of at a holding pattern in Texas to see what detrimental effects the voucher system will have. So I'm wondering if you think it's wise to bring up the voucher system to my rep. I mean, there's no way he doesn't know about it, right? So I just wonder if I should bring that up and let them know we're just waiting to see. But that's another reason why we need full funding, so that any kind of unintended consequences are averted. That was my question.
Great. So I'm going to start and then turn to Sarah. I would say on telling your stories, absolutely, yes, 100%. And if I made it sound like don't do that, that was a mistake. When we say like stick to what we're talking about, we mean, you know, we would like you to talk about these bills, but definitely tell your story, talk about who you are. You are their constituent. They need to hear about what is happening in your life and the things that make it harder and how they could solve it. So I just want to make that totally clear. And then I'm going to turn to Sarah on the education question.
Sure. So I wanted to say, so just to echo Rachel is, you know, what's going to get your member to sign on to these bills is your story about how this would affect you and that you can vote for them. And so if this affects you positively, then you're going to want to vote for them. So there's that. I think to go to the Medicaid stuff, I wanted to touch back on that, Shannon, because I don't feel like we answered the technical question of that. Is there are efforts to repeal. So there's a fully Democratic Senate effort that's been introduced that just repeals the health title. So all of the health provisions. So anything that's good in there. I mean, there's some stuff about people like more access to HCBS. You know, there's a few little good things that like can't really happen because you're just you're decimating everything. But so that Democratic bill would repeal it. There is a bill from Senator Hawley, you know, friend of January 6th, to repeal all of the Medicaid cuts before they take effect. That's really just Hawley out there. I think Rachel and I think it's important to talk about Medicaid and your story. I just want to flag, if you're with a Republican, they are very sensitive about that bill, as they should be, because they are screwing everybody over. However, they're killing people. Yeah. But no, you're totally agree. However, it may make it less likely that they will sign on to these other bills if it can get contentious about that. So I just want to flag that. You know, so you just need to weigh the pros and the cons, I guess. It's about priorities and your choices. So if it's someone you really do feel like you could get them on any of these bills and they're a Republican, I may, as angry as you are, I may try and hold back. And then it's hard, right? It's really hard. And then the voucher system, Veronica, as I said, I know all of you. I think, is Babin your representative? Is that right? I don't know where she is. Anyway, I think I would bring up the vouchers just as in the fact that they're an additional stressor on the system. You know, like, you know how to talk to Republicans. So I wouldn't talk about it with Cruz because he's, sucks. But but I think the others, Cornyn's office, you can bring it up not as like a value judgment, but just as an additional stressor on the system and just sort of a logic issue.
Hi, my name is Nina James Gregory. I come from Michigan. After doing advocacy work for multiple groups, all different types of ways, all different types of areas, the humanization of your story is actually what gets them, if you can get their attention. You do have to read the room. That is so key because some of them will slide. I've watched them being in Lansing, Michigan. I've watched ones call their assistant and slide the other way down stairwell paths to avoid you and talking to you for you to hold them accountable. It is so important. I can't even remember who my representative is right now, but that's because I have a newer diagnosed condition in 22.
Stevens. I told you I know all
That-
of you.
okay.
It's creepy.
Vascular insufficiency. So it's oftentimes I have to calm down before I can remember things. But if I can tell you nothing else, doing what we're doing now is what makes them pay attention. So it's just to help you out. Please tell them your story and even hold them accountable if they start, because they will do it. Just know that it's important, and especially getting to the Republican representatives, because a lot of them don't really even want to talk to you.
Vote them out.
Yes, they don't. So I'm just saying, just being honest.
Oh, so like I can ask one question right now. Okay. It's actually a bit of a suggestion that, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this particular strategy in mind. I feel like me being from Texas and both of our senators are Republicans, like I figured it might be smart for us is to talk to our Republican senators about IDEA full funding to see if we can get it full bipartisan sponsorship in the Senate. And as for the House, we can go ahead and talk about whichever of these bills are most passionate. We're most passionate about. Case in point, for me personally, at least, the Social Security stuff seems to be the most interesting and like the most beneficial. Well, especially considering that I'm still waiting for my SSDI application to be approved. So, other than that, what would you say about that particular strategy that I mentioned earlier, where where my fellow Texans specifically talk about the IDEA full funding to see if we can try and get some bipartisanship?
So I will say in my opinion, on the whole, I think of all the bills that have a shot, the SSI penalty elimination is the top. I think that it was really close last Congress. It's, in the Senate with IDEA, there's no Republicans on it currently. And as we have seen, Republicans are not brave. And it's always hard to be the first one. And so in my opinion, I think the SSI, if you have to pick a top, that would be my top. As Nina said, read the room, because I think the staffer you're working with or the member, you may know that they have a particular interest area or connection. So, that's why this is an art and not a science. But I think if I were to place bets, I would say the SSI bill should be the one you push most. What do you?
Yeah, I think what you're thinking about, which is thinking about your members, where they're from, where you can tell a story, I think that's a great way to approach it. So yeah, I agree.
The SSI rules needs to be updated because it is outdated to the current standards of living. It just is, period, including the income of the SSI. So I agree with you. Secondly, I understand your rationale about what you presented, what we're supposed to talk about, but I agree with the lady about sharing the story. And secondly, HR 1, I'm angry that children with disabilities with chronic illnesses will die without Medicaid. Seniors will die without Medicaid. Adults with chronic health conditions will die without Medicaid. That's a reality. A university said 51,000 people would die unnecessary every year. That's a reality. As much as we don't want to face this, deal with this, it's morally wrong. It's morally wrong that Republicans are kissing Trump's ass to extend the tax credit for the wealthy when we can't afford the tax cuts for the rich. It's misguided priorities. I'm hoping that next year that all states will turn blue to give the Republican Party the middle finger because they gave us the middle finger, our tax dollars at work.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
So, and I'm not going to apologize for shouting because I'm furious at my tax dollars going,
yeah,
for what? Death.
Yeah.
And I will hold Congress responsible for Americans' death.
Good.
Just like what happened with COVID. When those children who lost their parents for COVID, Trump blew it big time by waiting it too late when Americans was dying from COVID. My wife has long-term COVID and she's suffering, living miserably with her chronic pain and her illness relating to COVID symptoms to her MS. So.
No, I want you to know that we hear what you're saying, and Medicaid is something Rachel and I currently work on with almost every client we have. Rachel and I were both here in 2017 working on that. So, I just want you to understand that we feel you and hear you. I think what I would say tactically is sort of looking at the difference between lobbying and advocacy, right? And I think you have to read the room and how you want to be and think through your member and those dynamics, but particularly for some Republican members, if you think you can get them there, you need to give them something that they can do for you. And I think these bills are something that they can do for you. So yeah, but you are a citizen, and I think your point about elections, part of showing people, hey, we can vote you out, is that you're there and you're paying attention and that they know that you're a voter.
And I want to add, we picked ideas with AAPD that we thought here in September of 2025, we could get more support for and we could move. We're not done fighting for Medicaid. We're not done fighting against HR 1. That the tactics have changed kind of from Congress to lawsuits in the courts or on the executive branch side. But we haven't given up. We haven't said, well, we lost. We lost badly. But we're not done fighting for people and fighting to save Medicaid.
Go ahead. I just have a quick question about preparation for the meetings. How many copies do you think we should prepare for each office as far as copies of the materials? And then would you suggest maybe doing a one-page introduction sheet about yourselves, and then two, if you have contacted them in the past, to put a little reminder in that regarding these issues? Do you know what I'm saying? And then I also have a question too about follow-up. So as far as acting as a resource or follow-up, with the office? Do we email them after, send them a card? What would you suggest would be the best action afterwards to ensure that you remind them of that meeting?
Sure. Great questions. I think if you have time and capacity to prepare a one pager before tomorrow about yourself, that's great. I mean, I think the more information and the more memorable you can make yourself, the better. Russia and Michael would have to answer this, but I believe you should have at least enough copies to leave. Do they only have to leave one copy at every visit, right? That they have?
We emailed out the one pagers and we provided one copy within the folders. There is a business center to print more, or you can reach out to us to print more if you need more.
And I will say, in confirming all of your meetings, I have emailed the people the one pagers too. So they should have it multiple ways. And I think you're right about follow-up, sending an email, following up, maybe sending electronic one pagers again. Also, if, as Rachel mentioned earlier, if you have a question that you cannot answer, as everybody has rightly said, like, your value is your personal connection to this. So if there's like a statistic or a fact that you can't answer, Michael and Rasha or Rachel and myself, please feel free to refer them to us or just tell us and we can follow up with them as well.
Hi, my name's Greg. I'm from California. It was just more of a strategy question, I guess, for those of us who may be meeting with Republican representatives. I know, obviously, we want to keep politics out of this necessarily, but for the IDEA funding, I believe you mentioned that there was a backlog of Democratic representatives.
The SSI.
SSI. Okay, so flip that around. So for SSI, there is this backlog of additional supporters pending additional Republican supporters. For those of us meeting with Republican representatives, is that a valid strategy to bring up in the meetings, or do we want to keep that aspect of politics out of it and focus on the bill itself?
No, I think that's great. And creepily, I'm trying to remember who your member is. I think it might be
Marissa.
Is it Kim? Is that
Marissa?
Okay, Marissa.
Oh, Kim. Yeah, young Kim. Yes.
Marissa Hurt.
Sorry. I'm representing.
I think Kim is a very gettable one too. So.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Libby Lynn. I'm a PCA from New York for Sydney Strunagel. Thank you for being here and helping us. Regarding the introduction, first impressions, as we know, is very important. Could you give us some sort of sample soundbite of how you want us to introduce the AAPD, please?
Sure. I refer to Michael and Rashida, how they, I've been to plenty of Hill meetings with them and they are both experts. So do you want to say how you usually do it?
The best organization, no. We usually introduce ourselves as a disability-led nonprofit that represents over 70 million people with disabilities across the United States, working to empower people with disabilities and kind of, represent their policies and things like that. So that's kind of the general gist of it. However you view us, we would appreciate that. So that is the general gist of how we introduce ourselves in like a couple sentences. I don't know if Michael or Maria have anything else that they'd like to add. Oh, Maria, yes, yeah, Michael, if you want to give her a mic.
As the president and CEO, I better have this down. So what I say, and you all don't have to say this, is that the American Association of People with Disabilities is a national cross-disability, disability-led civil rights organization that works to advance the political and economic power of the more than 70 million people with disabilities living across the United States.
Okay. Hi, my name is Kirsten. I'm from South Carolina. So I'm kind of nervous to even mention it in here, let alone in the meetings. But okay, a little bit about me. I have two beautiful daughters from the same man. Okay. And I'm on SSI. Yeah. I'm not married. You guys can fill in the gaps there. How do I broach telling my story, my impactful story about the marriage penalty without worrying about legal backlash? And if there is not immunity for us as advocates, I highly recommend some sort of immunity paperwork in the future. So
Neither of us are lawyers, but Rachel's more of a fake lawyer.
I will say your comfort and feeling of safety is very important. So if that shapes how you tell your story, I think that makes sense. I think that is fine. You can, I don't want you sharing personal details that you don't feel comfortable sharing. So when you talk about SSI, you can say that you are on SSI and that you have children. This is just an example. You don't have to stick with this, and then talk in a general way about the need to raise the asset limits for both single people and for couples. That's my idea. But I would say definitely, you don't need to share information you are not comfortable sharing. And I hope that answers your question.
And I will say too, I think your Mace is your representative, is that right? Or is it Clyburn? Well, I think either of those honestly would be receptive audiences. Mace is does a lot about or at least feels a lot about like domestic issues. And so I would do that. I also think Tillis, some of those more like moderate Republicans want people to be able to get married. And so I think that's a point in favor, saying I would, at least when I'm inferring from what you're saying, is that you and your partner would like to be able to get married. And so I think in some ways that's just a persuasive argument for your cause.
Hi, my name is Sherry Smith, and I'm from Texas, and I'm here as a PCA for my best friend who suffered a stroke a little bit back. And I would say also, we have to remember that what you guys deal with on a daily basis is not Republican or Democratic. It's human, period. So as a journalist, I would say when you're telling your story, make them understand that the line between how you are and they are is extremely thin. They could walk out of the door and become part of this group. So when you're telling your story, make them understand you are that constituent who put him in office to handle the difficult areas that affect your life. So if they're not capable, I agree with the man up there. If they're not capable of doing what you've asked them to do, find someone who can and let them know. We appreciate your service, but your time is up. And we need someone else to come in and do what we need to do. But they need to understand they could be very quickly into what you're advocating for now. So maybe they should be proactive in their thinking that if it should happen to me, what would I need and want to be in place should I need those services?
And I just wanted to add a question. I would, first of all, like Rachel, that the comfort is most important, but Republicans tend to be all about, get married and, all. So there is actually a woman out in California who had filed a complaint against the Social Security Administration. She had been engaged to her fiance for 8 or 9 years, and she basically filed a complaint against the Social Security Administration, claiming that her inability to get married is a violation of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. That is a very persuasive argument with the Republicans.
Good morning. My name is Ruthie Goldcorn. No Barriers Disabled Access Consulting and Advocacy Services. I'm also with Californians for Disability Rights, and I have a strong foothold still in California, even though I now unfortunately reside in Arizona. And I don't know how many people here actually know that IDEA was adopted in 1968. And the funding mechanisms and methodology have not changed much since 1968. Obviously, education has, and I personally, and I apologize if I'm insulting anybody, loathe special education. There's nothing special about it. It is equitable education. We need to adopt the words equitable education. Special is paternalistic, and do not pat me on my head just because of that, because I tell you, I ain't special. And I've always said that the difference between a lobbyist and an advocate is a paycheck. And of course, we ain't got no paycheck. But on a more fundamental level, as has been stated here, who we are, what we are, and that we are voters. However, we do recognize, and I know AAPD and y'all have been at this, and I've been at this for 30 years. We are not a voting bloc that's respected or recognized. And when you show up at an office during Capital Action Day in your state, or we're storming the Citadel here, if you don't show up at the local office on a regular basis, you mean nothing to them. And you don't show up with people and who have voted and you wearing your stickers, they have to understand that we are a voting bloc that does need to be recognized and not special under any circumstances. And I live in a state where everybody gets $7,000 per kid in a voucher, and they can sit on that money. It is not a use it or lose it. And 70% of the people getting the vouchers in Arizona are millionaires. The studies have been published. And they have bought houses in Big Bear, and they have bought ATVs for every member of the family. And they have, hey, that's PE. And they have amassed upwards of $200,000 and $300,000 in their bank, not using it. There are no guardrails where I am. There will never be guardrails. No one will ever say to a family, here's your $7 grand for each kid. And if you want to get more kids, go ahead. And you can use it for whatever you want. Somebody bought a $15,000 piano. And how the guardrails are in place so that no equitable education money funding can be reallocated, redirected, or corrupted is really important. And I don't know that in the bill on IDEA, there are guardrails. There are giant walls that prevent any of this money from being redirected into a voucher program. And that obviously is very concerning in Texas. And this is something that's been where I am for quite a while. And for those of you who may not know, Section 14C, sorry, I'm switching gears for a second. Section 14C was written into the Fair Labor Act of 1938 and has been reapproved every time since then with no one paying attention. And we have got to make sure that they understand what 14C is, where it came from, how old it is, and why it was instituted, going back to the days of when we were handicapped because we had our cap in our hand on the street corners for money. That's where the word handicap came from. And that's why we don't use that word. And we have got to phase that out, just like we have to phase out special education and make us equitable. Thank you.
Okay. I do want to make sure we have time for individual scheduling questions. So I'll just let Michael and Rasha to keep sending me questions as long, but I wanted to flag the time. Yeah.
We'll just take one more question because Darlisa has been raising her hand for a while. And then after Darlisa and Mary, sorry, those two, then we'll do individual scheduling. Okay. And sorry, I know everyone has lots of questions. Like Rachel said, please email or message them to us. I also know a lot of people have questions about their schedules, which is why we want to put in the time for that. Okay.
Hi, my name is Darlisa Ware. I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm a disabled worker, a mother, a grad student. And I have a blind son and a son that's on a 504 IDA EA plan. I did want to share that since he has been on the IDA EA plan, that's what they call it in Arkansas. I don't say IDEA, I'm sorry. Most teachers and school personnel, they are familiar with the name, but have no idea what the programs are. So I am wanting to share that there's more funding and more education needed. I'm so thankful, that it exists, but there's more needed other than just knowing the name. That's one thing that I was going to share. And I work in organ procurement. I have the best job that I've ever had in my entire life, but I fear each day of losing my job due to my disability and the income limitations with disability. Although I have children that are disabled, due to me working and having the limitations, they're not able to receive benefits at all. So we're a household full of disabled people with no benefits, to be honest with you. Another thing that I wanted to share is when you go and meet with the representatives, you want to try and find a way that you can be remembered no matter what you do in that conversation. So just asking to maybe even take a photo before you leave. I have one. I'm so excited about meeting with Bruce Westerman. I met him in 2015 and I have a photo of me and him. And that's a way to open a conversation with him. And, and I can share that. I'll share it on Facebook with my friends. And, it's a way to make connections. I had a while to make notes while everybody else was talking. Another way to start a conversation and to gain interest is to say things that compliment the person that you're speaking to. So do a little research about who you're speaking to and the things that they're passionate about, and maybe start the conversation with that. And they're more willing to listen to you if you're talking to them about them. Everybody wants to hear about themselves. So I wanted to share that also.
Okay, thank you.
I'll do this real quickly, but it's a question about the meetings because they're every 30 minutes and you've got to get from one building to the other. I have the joy of speaking to people from Texas, as we all know, which is so fun, and getting it to be relatable. I look up what committees are they on, what caucuses are they on, is there some wording in their webpage that I can connect to, like John Cornyn says, we don't want to give handouts, we want to give hand up. So I want to use that, even though he's not my favorite person. But he's not going, that staff is not going to know that when I go there. So what is your recommendation? We have about 20 minutes. We have these 3 specific topics that we want to say, could you please co-sponsor is one of the main, can I get out the door with, could you please ask the senator to co-sponsor this? What are some other things to be as efficient from that legislative aid or legislative person's point of view? How are we going to be most effective and on point with them?
I'll start. Sarah might have more, but remind them that the materials are in their email, and that, we may be following up with them. That was a really excellent point about taking photos. Different offices have different rules about photos, but you can always ask if they'll take a photo. They'll almost always do it in the hallway, if not in the actual office. And you can ask for a photo with the person you met with or with your representative or senator.
I think, maybe giving your ask straight up and saying, here are the 3 bills. We'd like for you to co-sponsor them. And then if you have a particular bill that either the member or someone you or another constituent has a real connection to, maybe then launch into that story. Like if you can only tell one story, make sure it either goes to the member or goes to the voter, right? And I think you can always just continue the conversation. I think Darlisa had a really good point, like that this is just the beginning of your relationship with this office. And that also shows your power that you are watching them. That sounds creepy, but like they work for you. So, so you're watching them. And with photos, I would also encourage you all, I'm sure there's a hashtag and I just don't know it, but to post them on X, on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn, and tag the offices and say, please co-sponsor the SSI bill or whatever.
The hashtag is AAPD, Disability Power on the Hill. One question. Oh, good.
I was just gonna say a quick follow-up. I don't know if Sarah or Rachel have already said this. One thing I always do is to ask if there's anything that we can follow up with, like any information they need. You all are the most in tune to what is happening in your district, in your state. You are the experts there. So ask what they need and what information you can provide. And that is your way of maintaining that connection. So that is the most efficient way to also conduct those meetings. And Michael, did you want? Okay, so now we're going to try our best to adjust any schedules. I sent out the link to the Google Sheet where we're working off of that has everyone's group assignments and timings for their meetings. There have been some updates since I sent out the PDF versions because things change on the Hill, unfortunately. So timings have changed for some people. So please come up to us and we can see whether your meeting time has been changed or not. If you have any concerns or problems, come up to us and we'll try to do what we can. We're trying our best to accommodate everyone with their requests and their needs. We can't guarantee everything, but we will try our best. Thank you. Isabel is at the same table as Jaquil in the flowery shirt. Next to Jaquil's Isaac. Okay. Can Isaac and Isabel come to the front, please?
So I'm from Ohio, meeting with Moreno and Houston tomorrow. And I was wondering if I could get like a fact sheet about 14C holders in Ohio, like how big that is in Ohio.
Hold on. 1 moment.
If I give you my email, could you email that to me?
Yes.
I found the BLS.gov like live list. It's not accessible on my phone. It won't let me filter by Ohio. And unfortunately, my fiance took my laptop back to Columbus. So.
I can pull it up right now. But you're probably not the only one, so we could maybe make it so everybody gets a state by state.
Yeah. And I think I did not know about this, and I think looking back that I may have actually worked at a business that got a 14C. I worked at Nestle at a food safety plant, and so here's my email. Yeah, yeah. You can call me Dan, by the way. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Sorry, come over there.
My name is Gabriela.
Rachel,
Miss Barbara Merrill? Yeah. We've met her this year in San Diego. And we've met her last year in Santa Fe. It's a wonderful thing.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, the situation with Albert is complex. I moved from Nashville to New Jersey. You have no place to live. We became nomads. We may go. We could go with Section 8 vouchers. It's a mess. I need to get people from Tennessee involved to help us because New Jersey said we came from Nashville. We have nothing to do. It's quite about
There is someone from Tennessee here.